Hey everyone, it's Sel from Seljoy and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about some important updates that have come to the Apple ecosystem. Today was a huge announcement from WWDC 25 about what's going to be happening for iPadOS 26, iOS 26, macOS 26, visionOS 26, and watchOS 26. Oh yeah, did we forget about the Apple TV as well? The tvOS 26. Everything is shifting over to more uniformity, not just in the name, but also in the design language, the aesthetic, how the software behaves, how it looks, the user experience. Apple is getting closer and closer to a more unified experience across its platform. So we're excited for what that brings, because if you're watching this channel, chances are that you're curious about iPadOS or about iOS. You're curious about that multi-touch approach, that new design feel that kind of departs from the Mac, but kind of sits comfortably between iOS and macOS. I've always felt like the iPad was the device that had perhaps the most potential because it sat so comfortably between those two platforms, the mobile phone and the desktop or the laptop. So users have had a hard time defining what it is. I think most of us that are using the iPad for most of our everyday work, we don't have a problem with that ambiguity. We kind of like the flexibility to attach it to a keyboard and do keyboard things, or to detach it and take it in the palm of our hand, use a pencil or not, just use your fingers and get through your workflow in any format that you like. So Apple is leaning into some of this multi-functionality, and it's very interesting to see some of the new updates that they brought. And I want to discuss how this affects us as content creators, those of us that produce music, produce content. This channel is run completely on an iPadOS, so everything that you're seeing here gets edited on iPadOS. The tracks that I do here and feature here, for the most part, are on iPadOS. So these devices are no longer just looked at as great for consumption, but more so they are great for producing content and productivity, right? So I want to discuss some of the key features that I thought really stood out in this year's WWDC, and I was happy to see some of the additions that were here. To be honest with you, for most part of the WWDC conference today, I was kind of until they said iPadOS, and then I perked up, right? So let's take a look at some of the additions that have come to this platform. First, we want to talk about liquid glass. Okay, I know. It's one of those things that Apple loves to name, and perhaps it is something that we've seen in other operating systems in times past. If any of you like me came up using Windows, then you'll remember somewhat of a glass-like texture to former versions of the Windows operating system. It was beautiful then, and it's still beautiful now. You know, I think that a change in the aesthetic and how the operating system looks and feels is always a welcome change, because iOS tends to kind of stay simple. If it's not broke, don't fix it type of approach. They want to make sure that everybody gets in and knows how to use it from day one. So they're not trying to rock the boat too much, but I do like some of the translucency, the glass-like appeal, the flexibility of the lock screen, things like that, I think are a great touch that kind of make the device feel new. So after you do an update this time around for iPadOS 26 and iOS 26, it'll feel like a new device, and that's also a welcome feature. It was also interesting to see how the Apple Music platform is developing and evolving. So they want to feature artists' animated album artwork to further the motif, or to further the subtle imagery and messaging in their music. They want to create a more immersive experience for their listeners. So they're allowing artists to be able to upload some animated artwork. I thought that was a nice touch. I started to see hints of that already, particularly with artists that were releasing Dolby Atmos mixes. And the ability to produce in that format is something that I would love to see come to iPadOS. If you own a pair of AirPods, they are already listening to Dolby Atmos on your iPad or on your iPhone. So we're able to consume content in that format. It would be nice to add the Dolby Atmos creation tool to the iPadOS platform. And please don't say it can't happen, because I've seen enough in this update to say, yeah, they could totally do that. All right. So just as we move from consumption to productivity in other areas, let's see if we can work on that, Apple, and see if we can bring that to the platform. That would be amazing and awesome and change the game. Let's talk about the subtleties of AI across the platform. Now, I know many of you are very critical of Apple Intelligence because it does not do the trick. It doesn't do the gimmick. It doesn't do the immediate thing that all of the other AIs do. And it's an interesting flip because most of us will use ChatGPT or Grok or Gemini or some of the others that we use them to generate content. And we use them to maybe think tank a few things, give us ideas or an approach to something. So it immediately does the thing that we ask it to do. And that's what everybody expects of AI. What we don't want AI to do is to learn too much about us personally so that it can start to anticipate us too quickly, or perhaps learn our private details and things like that. And I think that's been the pushback, particularly in the privacy community. Now, interestingly enough, Apple has been a proponent for high levels of privacy and security across their platform. They've been known as the walled garden, not allowing a whole lot of malware or viruses onto its platform, particularly iOS and iPadOS. And so they've been successful in doing that and earning the trust of our community. However, what I saw in today's WWDC gave me pause, not to necessarily unsubscribe or opt out of what Apple Intelligence is doing, but more so being impressed with how they're doing it in a subtle way. If you notice from WWDC, Apple has baked in Apple Intelligence across the platform. It is not just a feature of the OS, but it seems to be ingrained in the OS. From translating phone calls and video calls and a translator app working across platform, from reading things that are in your mail app, reading your messages and anticipating you, the AI is actually learning you on a deeper level than anything Grok, GPT, Gemini, or any of them can do. Those other AIs are high on response, while Apple Intelligence is high on learning. And I think it began a few conferences ago when they started talking about machine learning. We're seeing a deep integration across the entire OS, okay? If that worries you, perhaps it should. But if you are looking for an AI that's more subtle at first, and is learning your patterns, anticipating you, introducing little things into your workflow to make it easier, to bring up suggestions as you're working, this is the type of AI that's gonna do that while you are working on your materials. It may not not necessarily do the work for you. If productivity is the aim of the game, you don't want AI to necessarily replace you doing the thing. And I think that's the interesting debate right now. And while Apple may not have delivered on all of the areas of Apple Intelligence that it had promised, I do see where they have taken things forward in a very subtle, non-flashy, yet deep learning approach. And if AI is a concern for you, then you should perhaps take this perspective, or my perspective, into consideration, because it's now being ingrained into the entire operating system. Reading messages, going through emails, going through all types of things to try and learn you. Now, Apple says it does not share this information with its own corporate offices, or this information stays locally processed here. But it's still using some cloud processing to be able to analyze, come back to you with suggestions, things like that. So it's a very interesting approach to AI that I think needs more conversations. It needs a closer look, and perhaps even a deeper appreciation for what they are bringing to the AI platform. We can see some of this subtle AI at work in apps like Apple Music, again, where they've incorporated it into the listening experience. So where users can now pull up the lyrics. If the song is in a different language, it'll translate it for you. Or if your language preference is different from English, it will translate it from English into your native language according to your preferences on your device. So there's also lyrics pronunciation, so that if you can't read the foreign language, it'll at least tell you how to pronounce it so you can start singing along. I noticed in some of the pre-show music before the event, there were songs being played in different languages, some pretty cool songs too. So it was interesting that Apple is bringing exposure to non-English, predominantly English artists. So that was very interesting, highlighting this new feature that they can translate music across language barriers. We also saw that there was an auto mix feature added into there. So it almost DJs the set for you. So you can jump in at perhaps a track that you did not think that you would ever listen to. Auto Mix has brought that track to you for you to add to your playlist and your overall listening experience. I also like the ability to pin music. So based on the music that you've pinned, it will generate other music that sounds like it, or a similar sounding artist. It will bring that to you. So AI is being integrated in a lot of the core apps. And I think while everyone is rushing to create a great AI for this, or for answering questions and answering all of that, Apple is taking a different approach in building it into core apps and the core user experiences, because they know that the AI itself is not a product. It's a feature. It is perhaps maybe a service, but it is not a product. Apple still owns the product platform. So they're building their AI into the whole product, which is much more immersive and perhaps can have a long-term advantage over these external AI apps, which can be installed and uninstalled. Okay, so it's a different approach. The next thing that caught my attention was the feature called continuity. Now, continuity is something that Apple has been working on for some time. So when we have apps on different devices, core apps like FaceTime or Messages or Mail or any one of those Apple core apps, you could start on one device, and when that computer or iPad or iPhone detects another device close by that's signed into the same Apple ID, Continuity will give you the option to pick up that task and finish it on the other device. And that's a great feature. And I'm starting to see some more mentions of Logic Pro for the iPad, even on the desktop version. I came across, and I'm putting it up on the screen, I came across this notification when I opened up Logic Pro for the desktop for the first time after the 11.2 update. And there it was, a notification to download Logic Pro for the iPad and to start using them in a collaborative way. And I thought that was very, very cool. So we're starting to see that Logic is finding ways to bridge the gap between its mobile apps as well as its desktop and laptop apps. So when I say apps for mobile, we also have to include Logic Remote. Logic Remote, and that is a great app to have on your iPad as well. So I'm gonna perhaps do another video on how all of these apps work really well together in establishing Logic or integrating the different Logic apps into one holistic platform, thinking of it as a platform, a creative tool as a platform, rather than just an app in and of itself. Okay, so as more features begin to migrate over, and as we begin to see more improvements, we're going to recognize that, hey, they're doing some deep integration here that I think can benefit the creative process in a powerful way. Now let's finally talk about the benefits to the iPadOS platform specifically. One thing I saw today was better file management. Yes, I was very happy to see improvements that they made to the Files app. File management is much more efficient now, and I think for most of us working in loading in assets and files in and out of Logic Pro for the iPad, this is going to be a great feature for us, a feature update for us. Advanced multitasking. I was very happy to see this brand new take on multitasking. Finally, Apple has broken the iPad out of the default single screen aspect. It seems as if, based on the previous versions versus this new version, at least the render that we've seen is of course going to go into beta before it becomes cemented as the new iPadOS. But it seems that right off the gate, that Stage Manager is always running. So when you open up an app, Stage Manager allows you to immediately resize the apps to the orientation that you want. So if Stage Manager is always running, that's its default. However, it's not forcing you into a limited aspect ratio. It's not doing a lot of the app tiling on the left-hand side, eating up screen space. It's just allowing you to fluidly just resize apps to any size that you want. And it looks like they've given us access to multitask with more apps. I saw as many as 7 applications with their own uniquely sized windows open at the same time on the screen. And I love that. I think that's great for productivity and workflow. And I'm wondering, with this new version of multitasking or multiple windows, will applications like Logic Pro allow the user to pop open a section, let's say the mixer section or particular plugin? Can we tap on that and that jump into its own window that we can resize and then go back and forth to the arrange window? Do we have enough screen real estate to do that? And is that a feature that you guys would like to see? Or are you now working in this workflow where different windows would fly in and fly out and be neatly tucked away or nested away in a menu? That's what we're currently working with. But with this new Stage Manager, this new multitasking format, it looks like multiple windows can be open and resized that will. And I'd love to see different applications be able to do that within their own app. I'd love to see that feature turned on. Another great thing I'm happy to see is that iOS or iPadOS is finally giving us independent control of our audio sources. This was always a sore point, because if you were using a dongle or a USB-C hub, whichever device you plugged in last, that became the default device to use for your audio output, and then you would have to go either into the app settings or into your controls panel settings to switch it back, or to try and force it to go back to the audio output source that you wanted to use, or even the input source that you wanted to use. So I'm happy to see that the operating system is now giving us independent control, or our own independent control over the audio sources that we want to use. That's a welcome update. So thank you, Apple. That's been a long time coming. That kind of should have been in there from the jump, but we'll take it. We'll take it. Here's another interesting take on Logic Pro for the iPad. We have to remember that this device, because it's on the mobile platform, it can be orientated not only in a landscape view, but also in a portrait view. And there's an interesting video on social media I saw where someone had bought a big screen for their desktop, and they flipped it and said, "Hey, Logic's in portrait." And I almost did a response video, so like, yeah, it's the same way over here on the iPad too. That was the case from day one. We could get Logic in portrait mode. And that orientation actually makes you create differently, makes you think differently, makes you edit differently. And I think that's the beauty of this platform, is that you can grab and go with this device and record anywhere. And now with updates to these devices, speakers and microphones, particularly on the newer iPads, where they're stating that you can get studio quality recordings on these mics. It's going to be great for content creators if you're producing a podcast, or even recording audio remotely in another room, or perhaps you want to capture room ambiance, or perhaps you want to capture the recording of an instrument up close on video as well as with great audio. So these devices are quickly becoming creative tools. They even mentioned using your AirPods as studio quality microphones for your recordings. And I think that's a refreshing update, because normally when you record something through your AirPods, the audio quality is not that great. But with a firmware update to your AirPods, it would allow you to record higher quality audio. They're doing something with the algorithms, changing the way it recognizes voice patterns, using AI, even in this instance, to block out background noise. That's huge. One last feature that needs to be talked about from WWDC this year is the introduction of background tasks. I think that's a good feature, and we saw on the screen how a Final Cut session was being rendered in the background while the user was in a completely different app. This is giving more laptop functionality. It's actually using the broad power that these devices have. Even the early versions of the iPad were packed with power from that Apple Silicon, and I think it's a great addition to add background tasks here so that we can start to see more of the multitasking take place. What other feature did you see in today's WWDC announcement? Was this something that you enjoyed? Did you yawn through it, or did you perk up when they started talking about iPadOS? Or what other part of the conference really grabbed your attention? Leave me a comment. Let's talk about this. Thanks for tuning in today, and I hope to bring you some more updates as we see how this platform evolves. Catch you later at the next one. Take care.